One moment of betrayal changes everything. The fellowship that was supposed to destroy the One Ring is about to shatter into pieces that can never be put back together. Now, if you're new here, we posted the timeline of Fellowship of the Ring on our channel a few days ago. It's important to understand how the Fellowship came together before diving into how it falls apart in the Two Towers. So before we start, let us quickly rewind to what happened last in the previous movie. The Hill of Amun-Hen becomes a battlefield when Saruman's Uruk-hai find the Fellowship. These aren't ordinary orcs. They're bigger, stronger, and built for war. They want the hobbits alive, but they'll kill anyone who gets in their way. Boromir sees what's happening and makes a choice that defines his entire life. The man who tried to take the ring from Frodo just hours earlier now throws himself between the Uruk-hai and the two youngest hobbits. His horn echoes across the hillside as he calls for help that won't arrive in time. The fight is hopeless from the start. Boromir faces dozens of enemies with nothing but his sword and shield. Arrow after arrow finds its mark, but he keeps fighting. Merry and Pippin try to help, throwing rocks and shouting, but they're just children facing monsters. When Boromir finally falls, he's taken at least 20 Uruks with him. The arrows in his chest should have killed him already, but something keeps him breathing long enough to see Aragorn running toward the battle. The ranger arrives too late to save the hobbits, but not too late to hear Boromir's final words. The dying man looks up at Aragorn and speaks words that wash away his earlier betrayal. He acknowledges Aragorn as his king and tries to apologize for his weakness with the ring. Boromir dies, knowing he found his honor again in the moment that mattered most. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli stand over their fallen companion while Merry and Pippin disappear into the distance as prisoners. The Fellowship has a choice to make. Follow Frodo and Sam toward Mordor, or chase after the captured hobbits. They can't do both. The funeral they give Boromir follows the traditions of Gondor. They place his body in one of the elven boats from Lothlorien, arranging his weapons around him like a warrior going to his rest. The boat carries him down the great river Anduin and over the falls of Rauros, where the mist rises like the breath of the dead. Far away in Gondor, Faramir finds his brother's cloven horn washed up on the riverbank. He doesn't need anyone to explain what it means. In his mind, he sees a vision of the funeral boat carrying Boromir to his final rest. The horn tells him everything he needs to know about how his brother died. Meanwhile, Frodo makes his own choice about the Fellowship's future. The ring's power has been growing stronger since they left Lothlorien, and he can feel it calling to every member of their group. Boromir's attempt to take it proved that no one is safe from its corruption. The decision to leave alone tears at Frodo's heart, but he believes it's the only way to protect his friends. He slips away from their camp while the others are distracted by the Uruk-hai attack, planning to cross the river and head toward Mordor by himself. Sam notices Frodo's absence almost immediately. The faithful gardener understands what his master is trying to do, and he won't allow it. He chases after Frodo to the riverbank, calling out his name as the hobbit pushes an elven boat into the water. The river current is stronger than Sam expected. He tries to wade after Frodo's boat, but gets pulled under by water that's deeper than he can handle. Sam never learned to swim properly, and the heavy river starts dragging him down toward a drowning death. Frodo sees his dearest friend disappearing beneath the surface and makes his own choice. He dives into the water and pulls Sam up, gasping and sputtering, but alive. As they sit in the boat together, Sam makes it clear he's not going anywhere. The faithful gardener speaks words that will echo through everything that comes after. He can't carry the ring for Frodo, but he can carry Frodo himself if necessary. No matter what happens, Sam won't let his master face this burden alone. Aragorn faces his own impossible decision when he realizes both Frodo and the other hobbits are gone. The ranger who spent decades running from his destiny as king now has to choose which path serves the greater good. Follow the ring-bearer or save the captured hobbits. The choice comes down to trust. Aragorn believes Frodo and Sam have the best chance of reaching Mordor if they travel alone and unnoticed. But Merry and Pippin need immediate rescue, and every hour of delay makes their situation more dangerous. Legolas and Gimli agree with Aragorn's reasoning without argument. The elf and dwarf, who started this journey as enemies, now stand united in their determination to save their smallest companions. They understand that some choices split your heart, but you make them anyway. The three hunters set out across the plains of Rohan, following tracks that lead toward unknown dangers. Behind them, the boats of Lothlorien drift empty on the water. Ahead lies a chase that will test everything they believe about duty, friendship, and the price of doing what's right. The fellowship that began in the halls of Rivendell ends on the shores of the great river. 9 companions have become 3 separate groups, each facing perils that could destroy them. The ring continues its journey toward Mount Doom, but now it travels with only 2 hobbits to guard it. The breaking of the fellowship changes the entire war. Instead of one group moving toward a single goal, the quest splits into multiple threads that will weave through battles, betrayals, and sacrifices. Each choice leads to new consequences that no one can predict. The Hill of Amon Hen becomes a place of endings and beginnings. Boromir's sacrifice redeems his honor while ending his life. Frodo and Sam begin their lonely path towards certain doom. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli start a chase that will change the fate of kingdoms. The Fellowship is broken, but its pieces will reshape Middle-earth in ways that unity never could. A creature driven mad by 500 years of obsession is about to become the most dangerous guide in Middle-earth. Frodo and Sam are walking straight into a trap they can't even see coming. The rocky maze of Emin Muil stretches out like a nightmare built from stone. These hills on the eastern side of the great river create a labyrinth where travelers can wander for weeks without finding a way out. Sharp cliffs rise through thick mist, while loose rocks threaten to send anyone climbing them tumbling to their death. Frodo and Sam pick their way through this treacherous landscape with growing desperation. Every path they try leads to another dead end. Every cliff they scale reveals more cliffs ahead. The terrain seems designed to trap wanderers and drive them to madness. Their salvation comes from an unlikely source. Galadriel gave them elven rope back in Lothlorien, and its magical properties prove more useful than either hobbit expected. The rope allows them to descend steep cliff faces that would otherwise be impossible to climb. Sam discovers the rope's most amazing feature by accident. His weight during one descent causes him to lose his grip and fall through the thick fog. The drop turns out to be only a few feet, but when they tug on the rope afterward, something incredible happens. The elven rope unties itself from the rock where they anchored it. The magical cord refuses to stay knotted when they pull on it, sliding free to coil neatly in Sam's hands. This property means they won't leave evidence of their route for any enemies who might be tracking them. As they continue through Emyn Muil, Frodo feels the ring's weight pressing down on him like a physical burden. The closer they get to Mordor, the heavier the cursed jewelry becomes. Sometimes the weight is so overwhelming that Frodo stumbles and nearly falls. The ring shows him visions that make his situation even worse. When Frodo looks toward Mordor, the eye of Sauron flashes in his mind like a giant searchlight looking for him. The sensation is so intense that he almost collapses from the pressure of that terrible gaze. Sam becomes Frodo's anchor during these difficult moments. The faithful gardener offers sips of water and pieces of lembas bread while speaking words of comfort and encouragement. He doesn't fully understand what his master is experiencing, but he knows how to help anyway. Both hobbits can feel something watching them as they travel. The sensation of being stalked grows stronger each day, though they never see their pursuer directly. Strange sounds in the darkness suggest something is following just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. The creature tracking them is Gollum, the wretched being who possessed the ring for centuries before Bilbo found it. The loss of his precious has driven him across Middle-earth in a desperate search that finally led him to the hobbits, carrying what he considers his property. Frodo and Sam decide to set a trap rather than continue living in fear of their unseen stalker. They pretend to fall asleep while leaving crumbs of lembas bread scattered nearby as bait. The plan works better than they hoped when Gollum finally reveals himself. The attack comes in the darkness as Gollum pounces on what he thinks are sleeping targets. Instead, he finds two determined hobbits ready for a fight. Sam tackles the creature while Frodo moves to help, creating a desperate struggle in the rocky terrain. Gollum proves much stronger than his emaciated appearance suggests. Centuries of living in caves and tunnels have given him wiry muscles and surprising endurance. He nearly breaks free from Sam's grip multiple times while trying to bite his captors and grab the ring hanging around Frodo's neck. The fight ends when Frodo draws Sting and holds the glowing elven blade to Gollum's throat. The creature freezes immediately, understanding that one wrong move will end his long existence. His eyes fix on the sword with the kind of fear that comes from knowing you're completely helpless. Sam wants to tie up their prisoner with the elven rope, but the magical cord causes Gollum incredible pain. The rope sizzles against his skin like acid, making him howl and writhe in agony. The elven craftsmanship that makes the rope useful to the hobbits makes it torture for a creature corrupted by the ring's power. Gollum begs for mercy with words that would move anyone's heart. He calls them cruel for hurting him and promises he means no harm to anyone. The performance is convincing enough that Frodo starts feeling sorry for the pathetic creature at their mercy. Frodo remembers Gandalf's words about Gollum deserving pity rather than hatred. The wizard believed the wretched creature might still have some role to play in the ring's destruction, though he never explained what that role might be. The memory influences Frodo's decision about what to do with their captive. More practically, Frodo realizes Gollum could solve their navigation problems. The creature knows paths through the wilderness that would take the hobbits months to find on their own. With the right guide, they could reach Mordor much faster than traveling blind through hostile territory. The bargain Frodo offers is simple. Swear to help them reach their destination and earn freedom from the painful rope. Gollum accepts immediately, though his reasons have nothing to do with gratitude or genuine cooperation. The oath Gollum swears uses the ring itself as his bond. He promises by the precious to serve the master of the precious, creating a magical compulsion that prevents him from directly betraying the ring-bearer. The words bind him more securely than any rope or chain could manage. Smeagol will swear on the precious, Gollum cries out, using his original name to emphasize his sincerity. The performance convinces Frodo that their former enemy can become a useful ally, though Sam remains deeply suspicious of the creature's true motives. Frodo removes the burning rope and helps Gollum to his feet. The act of mercy creates a connection between them that goes beyond simple master and servant relationships. Gollum begins calling Frodo Master while agreeing to guide them through the dangerous landscape ahead. Sam's skepticism proves well-founded, though neither hobbit understands the true danger they're walking into. Gollum has his own plans for the ring that have nothing to do with helping its current bearer reach Mount Doom safely. The unlikely trio sets out from Emyn Muil, with Gollum leading the way. The creature knows paths that orcs avoid, routes through terrain too difficult for large armies to navigate. His knowledge of the wilderness gives the hobbits their best chance of reaching Mordor undetected. Gollum moves ahead of his companions with obvious enthusiasm, sniffing out the safest route down from the jagged hills. In the early morning light, he almost looks harmless as he skips from rock to rock like a child playing games. Frodo calls their guide by his original name, Smeagol, hoping to encourage whatever humanity might still exist in the corrupted creature. The gesture seems to work as Gollum responds more positively to his old identity than to the name that represents his darker nature. The hobbits follow their new guide with cautious hope. They need to reach the Dead Marshes and eventually Mordor itself, journeys that would be nearly impossible without someone who knows the way. Gollum represents their best chance of survival in a land that wants them dead. The taming of Gollum marks a turning point in Frodo and Sam's quest. They've gained a guide who knows paths through the wilderness, but they've also accepted a companion whose loyalty comes from magical compulsion rather than genuine friendship. The choice will have consequences that extend far beyond their immediate need for navigation. Two young hobbits are running for their lives, while three warriors push themselves beyond human limits to catch up. This is about to become the most desperate chase in Middle-earth history. The Uruk-hai troop carrying Merry and Pippin moves across the plains of Rohan like a dark storm cloud racing toward the horizon. These aren't the slow-moving orcs that most people know about. Uruks are bigger, stronger, and built for exactly this kind of brutal march across open country. Ugluk leads the pack with the authority of someone who answers directly to Saruman. The massive Uruk drives his troops forward at a pace that would kill ordinary soldiers, but his warriors keep up because they know what happens to anyone who falls behind. The two hobbit prisoners get dragged along whether they can keep up or not. When Merry and Pippin stumble from exhaustion, the Uruks simply grab them and carry them like sacks of grain. The creatures show no concern for their captives' comfort or safety beyond keeping them breathing. The situation gets more complicated when a group of Mordor orcs joins the march. Grishnak leads these servants of Sauron, and he has very different ideas about where the prisoners should go. Saruman wants the hobbits brought to Isengard, but Sauron's forces think they belong in Barad-dûr. The argument between the two groups creates exactly the kind of chaos that clever prisoners can use to their advantage. Merry and Pippin watch their captors argue and realize that divided enemies make mistakes. They start looking for ways to turn the situation in their favor. Pippin notices that Merry took a nasty blow to the head during the fight at Amon Hen. His friend seems dazed and weak, but Pippin realizes this could actually help them. He starts telling the Uruks that Merry is dying from thirst and needs water immediately. The performance works better than Pippin hoped. Ugluk doesn't want to explain to Saruman why one of his precious prisoners died on the march, so he forces Orc Draft down Merry's throat. The foul liquid burns like poison, but it has an immediate effect that surprises everyone. Merry revives with sudden energy that makes him seem completely recovered from his injury. The orc draft works like a brutal medicine that heals wounds while causing incredible pain. Merry uses this opportunity to gather his strength while pretending to be sicker than he really is. The clever hobbit realizes that appearing weak might slow down their captors. If the Uruks think he's barely alive, they might take more breaks or move more carefully. Every delay gives their friends more time to catch up. Pippin takes advantage of the confusion to work on the knots binding his hands. Hours of patient effort finally loosen the ropes enough that he can slip one hand partially free. The small victory gives him access to something that might save their lives. The leaf-shaped brooch from his elven cloak becomes Pippin's secret weapon. The green ornament was a gift from Lothlorien, and he manages to shake it loose without any of the Uruks noticing. The small piece of jewelry falls to the grass like a leaf blown from a tree. Pippin's hope rests on Aragorn's reputation as the best tracker in Middle-earth. If anyone can follow their trail and find the clues he's leaving behind, it would be the ranger who spent decades hunting dangerous quarry through every kind of terrain. That hope turns out to be well placed. Not far behind the Uruk-hai, 3 figures race across the grasslands of Rohan at a pace that defies human endurance. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli have been running for days with almost no rest, driven by their determination to save their captured friends. Aragorn uses every skill he learned during his years as a ranger. He runs with his ear pressed to the ground, listening for the thunder of many feet moving in formation. The technique tells him how far ahead their quarry is and whether they're gaining or losing ground. Legolas contributes his incredible elven eyesight to their tracking efforts. The elf can spot details on the horizon that human eyes would never notice. Sometimes he actually sees the distant Uruk-hai troop, confirming that they're still on the right trail. Gimli struggles more than his companions because dwarves aren't built for long-distance running. He complains that his people are natural sprinters who excel at short bursts of speed. But this endless marathon across open plains tests his endurance to the breaking point. Despite his physical disadvantages, Gimli refuses to slow down or be left behind. The dwarf pushes himself beyond his natural limits because friendship matters more than comfort. His determination inspires his companions to keep going when exhaustion threatens to stop them. The moment when Aragorn finds Pippin's brooch creates the first real hope they've felt since beginning their chase. The small green ornament lying in the grass like a fallen leaf proves that the hobbits are still alive and still thinking clearly enough to leave clues. The ranger's reaction shows how much this discovery means to all of them. Not idly do the leaves of Lorien fall, he says, recognizing the significance of a deliberate signal rather than an accident. The brooch renews their energy and confirms they're closing the gap. By Aragorn's calculations, they're less than a day behind their quarry now. The Uruk-hai have been running for 3 days and nights, but so have their pursuers. The question is whether 3 determined warriors can catch up to an entire troop before something terrible happens to their friends. The chase continues through day and night as both groups push themselves to their absolute limits. Aragorn notices that some evil power gives the Uruks supernatural endurance, while the same dark influence seems to drain strength from anyone trying to stop them. The observation explains why this pursuit has become so grueling. Saruman's magic helps his servants while hindering their enemies, turning what should be a simple matter of faster runners catching slower ones into a battle against supernatural forces. Even so, the 3 hunters refuse to give up. They run through rocky terrain and grasslands under both sun and moon, stopping only for brief moments to catch their breath before continuing. Their dedication amazes the Rohirrim who witness their passing. The people of Rohan have never seen anything like this pursuit. 3 warriors covering incredible distances at sustained speeds that seem impossible for any living beings. The sight becomes legend among the horse lords, who understand better than most what it takes to travel far and fast. Legolas keeps his companions motivated with words of encouragement when exhaustion threatens to defeat them. Even Gimli finds reserves of strength he didn't know he possessed, driven by loyalty that overcomes physical limitations. The chase becomes a race against time, with stakes that go beyond the lives of 2 hobbits. Every step brings both groups closer to whatever fate awaits at the end of their desperate journey across the plains of Rohan. While the Fellowship chases across the plains, a kingdom is being destroyed from the inside out. Saruman has spent years preparing for this moment, and now Rohan faces enemies they never saw coming. Deep beneath Isengard, the forges of Orthanc work day and night to create an arm that will change the face of Middle-earth. Saruman has transformed his tower into a massive weapons factory where thousands of Uruk-hai get equipped with armor and blades designed for one purpose: the complete destruction of Rohan. The wizard communicates with his master through a palantir, one of the seeing stones that allows instant contact across any distance. Sauron and Saruman coordinate their plans through this magical connection, creating an alliance between the 2 towers that should be unstoppable. No power in Middle-earth can stand against their combined strength. Saruman shows no respect for the natural world as he fuels his war machine. His orcs dam the river Isen to power his mills while cutting down entire sections of Fangorn Forest for fuel. Ancient trees that have grown for centuries become nothing more than firewood for forges that churn out instruments of death. The wizard doesn't rely solely on his Uruk-hai forces. He makes deals with the Dunlendings, wild hillmen who have hated Rohan for generations. These fierce warriors get promises of land and revenge against the horse lords who drove their ancestors from fertile valleys into the harsh mountains. The Dunlendings need no encouragement to raid Rohan's western border. Villages that have known peace for decades suddenly face attacks in the dead of night. Homes burn while families flee into the darkness, hoping to escape the violence that erupts without warning. One village becomes the scene of particular tragedy when Dunlending raiders strike with Uruk-hai support. The attack comes so suddenly that most residents have no chance to defend themselves. Houses go up in flames while people run screaming through streets that have become battlefields. Morwen faces every parent's worst nightmare as enemies pour into her village. She puts her 2 young children, Frida and Eotan, on a horse and sends them racing toward Edoras to raise the alarm. The mother stays behind as flames consume everything she's ever known, her fate uncertain as the village dies around her. The raids across Rohan's Westfold serve a larger purpose than simple destruction. Each attack weakens the kingdom's defenses while creating streams of refugees who burden Edoras with desperate people needing help. Saruman understands that destroying morale can be as effective as destroying armies. His main assault targets the fords of Isen, a strategic river crossing that guards the approach to Rohan's capital. Prince Theodred commands the forces defending this crucial position, But he faces an enemy that outnumbers his troops by overwhelming margins. The battle at the fords turns into a massacre as Saruman's Uruk-hai army launches a surprise attack that scatters Rohan's defenders. These aren't the disorganized orc raids that Rohan has dealt with before. This is a coordinated military assault by disciplined forces with superior equipment and tactics. Eomer arrives with reinforcements too late to prevent disaster. He finds a scene of horror where the river runs red with the blood of Rohan's finest soldiers. Bodies float downstream while the survivors try to tend wounded comrades who may not live to see another dawn. Theodred lies barely alive on the riverbank, gravely wounded from multiple injuries that should have killed him already. Eomer's men drive off the remaining orcs before carefully moving the prince back to Edoras, though everyone knows his condition is desperate. The true tragedy of Rohan's situation becomes clear when Eomer brings news of his nephew's condition to King Theoden. The once vigorous ruler sits listless on his throne, appearing decades older than his actual age. The king who once led cavalry charges now seems barely aware of what's happening around him. Theoden's condition isn't natural aging, but the result of constant manipulation by Grima Wormtongue. The king's advisor feeds him doses of Saruman's sorcery disguised as medicine and counsel. The dark magic saps Theoden's strength while clouding his mind, making him dependent on the very person who's betraying him. When Eomer arrives with Theodred's broken body, Eowyn tends her wounded cousin with all the skill she possesses. The king's niece has become the strongest person in the royal family as both her uncle and cousin fade from their injuries. She watches Theodred die in her arms while Theoden shows almost no reaction to his son's death. Eomer's fury at his uncle's indifference erupts when he confronts the court with proof of Saruman's treachery. He holds up an orc helmet bearing the white hand of Saruman, physical evidence that the wizard everyone trusts is actually their greatest enemy. The nephew's pleas for action fall on deaf ears as Wormtongue intervenes with smooth words and false reassurances. Grima insists that Saruman remains a loyal ally who would never harm Rohan, twisting the evidence to support his lies. The advisor's influence over Theoden proves stronger than family bonds or obvious truth. Wormtongue sees Eomer as the greatest threat to his control over the kingdom. The nephew's loyalty to Rohan and suspicion of outside influence make him dangerous to someone whose power depends on keeping the king isolated and confused. Something must be done to remove this obstacle. The solution comes through manipulating Theoden's weakened state. Wormtongue convinces the king that Eomer's accusations represent disloyalty that cannot be tolerated. By royal decree, the kingdom's best military commander gets stripped of rank and banished from Rohan on pain of death. The injustice of punishing their most capable leader for telling the truth drives many of Eomer's riders to make an impossible choice. They can obey their king's unjust command or follow the man who's earned their loyalty through years of honorable service. Most choose exile over abandoning their captain. Eomer's banishment leaves Rohan defensively crippled at the worst possible moment. The kingdom's main army scatters as their commander disappears into exile with his most loyal followers. The remaining forces lack leadership and coordination needed to face the crisis bearing down on them. Refugees from the Westfold raids arrive at Edoras seeking help from their king, only to find a ruler who doesn't seem to understand the scope of the disaster. Morwen's children are among those turned away by a court that has become indifferent to its people's suffering. Wormtongue's control over Theoden means the king remains inactive even as orc raiders pillage his western territories unchecked. The advisor's hold over the royal court allows Saruman's forces to operate freely while Rohan's defenses crumble from within. Saruman's strategy of weakening Rohan through internal corruption and external pressure achieves exactly what the wizard intended. The kingdom that should be Middle-earth's strongest cavalry force becomes a broken realm, unable to defend its own people. The stage is set for final conquest when the wizard chooses to strike the killing blow. Three days of running are about to end in a bloodbath that nobody sees coming. The hobbits think they're going to become dinner, but help is racing toward them at full speed. Night falls on the third day as Ugluk's Uruk-hai finally reach the edge of Fangorn Forest on Rohan's northern border. The endless running has pushed even these tough warriors to their breaking point. They decide to make camp and rest, though they pick the worst possible place to stop. The Uruks build a bonfire using trees they cut down from the forest edge. They have no idea that chopping up the ancient wood makes something very old and very angry watching them from the shadows. But that anger will have to wait, because the orcs have more immediate problems to deal with. Many of the Uruks haven't eaten in days, and hunger makes them look at Merry and Pippin with the wrong kind of interest. One orc suggests that meat's back on the menu and that they should kill the hobbits for dinner. The comment terrifies the two prisoners who realize they might not survive the night. Ugluk puts an end to that conversation in the most violent way possible. He cuts off the head of the orc who suggested eating the hobbits, making it clear that anyone who touches the prisoners will die. Saruman wants them delivered alive because he thinks one of them carries something valuable. The Uruk leader believes the hobbits have some kind of elvish weapon, though he's actually thinking of Aragorn's dagger that got dropped during the fight at Amon Hen. The mistake saves Merry and Pippin's lives because Ugluk thinks they're too important to become dinner. The arguing and violence create exactly the kind of chaos that clever prisoners can use to their advantage. Merry and Pippin squirm away from their distracted guards and slip into the darkness at the forest's edge. They're still tied up, but at least they're not surrounded by hungry orcs anymore. Merry feels dizzy from his head wound and the orc medicine they forced down his throat. But he urges Pippin to keep running. The two hobbits stumble through the underbrush, trying to put distance between themselves and their captors before anyone notices they're gone. That's when they hear a savage cry that changes everything. The riders of Rohan have arrived, and they're not in a mood for talking. Eomer leads roughly 100 Rohirrim exiles who have been tracking this Uruk-hai band for days. These are the warriors who chose to follow their captain into banishment rather than abandon him. Now they finally have a chance to strike back at Saruman's forces. The attack comes under cover of darkness as the horse riders encircle the orc camp and charge with spears ready. The Uruks are completely caught off guard because they thought they had outrun any pursuit. Many die before they can even grab their weapons. The battle becomes a slaughter as torchlight and moonlight illuminate the fighting on the open ground. The Rohirrim cut through the orcs with the fury of warriors who have lost their home and their king to Saruman's corruption. This is their chance for revenge. Ugluk rallies some of his Uruks and puts up a fierce fight that kills several Rohirrim before he finally goes down. The Uruk leader proves his courage even though his cause is hopeless. He dies fighting like the warrior he always claimed to be. In the middle of all this chaos, Grishnak sees Merry and Pippin trying to escape and breaks away from the main battle. The Mordor orc believes one of the hobbits carries the ring and he wants to search their bodies for it after he kills them. Grishnach catches the stumbling hobbits just as they think they might actually get away. He threatens to end their lives right there in the forest, but a Rohirrim spear finds him first. The weapon lifts him right off his feet before he hits the ground dead. Merry and Pippin find themselves free from their last captor, but they're still in danger from the battle raging around them. Horses gallop past in the darkness, and Pippin almost gets trampled by riders who can't see him in the confusion. The two hobbits flatten themselves against the ground and try to become invisible while the fighting continues above them. They stay hidden in the brush as the Rohirrim finish off the last of the Uruk-hai and start cleaning up the battlefield. Eomer orders his men to gather all the orc bodies into one big pile for burning. The riders don't notice two small figures hiding at the forest edge because they're focused on destroying every trace of their enemies. The pyre burns with sick-smelling smoke that makes Merry and Pippin cover their noses while they watch from hiding. The Rohirrim sing battle songs as the flames consume the bodies of Saruman's warriors. Victory tastes sweet after days of hard riding and desperate fighting. Once the riders finish their grim work, they mount up and disappear into the night. They've fulfilled their promise to cleanse Rohan of Saruman's orcs, at least this particular band. The battlefield falls quiet except for the crackling of dying flames. Merry and Pippin finally emerge from their hiding spot, coughing from the smoke and exhausted from their ordeal. They're alone and free for the first time since the attack at Amon Hen, but their hands are still tied with orc rope that cuts into their wrists. The hobbits use one of the fallen orc blades to cut each other loose, which takes more effort than it should because their hands shake from fear and exhaustion. But they manage to free themselves and take their first real breaths as liberated prisoners. Looking around at the smoking battlefield, Merry and Pippin realize they need to find shelter and safety. The ancient forest of Fangorn stretches out behind them, offering protection from any other enemies who might be wandering the plains. The two hobbits venture deeper under the old trees, seeking safety in a place that feels different from any forest they've ever known. The air itself seems alive with watching eyes, though they can't see anything moving in the shadows. Merry and Pippin don't realize that something ancient and powerful has been observing their escape and rescue. The forest around them holds secrets that go back thousands of years, and they're about to meet a being older than the kingdoms of men. The battle at Fangorn's edge marks the end of their captivity, but the beginning of a new adventure. They've escaped from Saruman's Uruks, only to walk into the domain of creatures that most people think are myths and legends. Exhausted and hungry, the two hobbits settle down to rest among trees that have been growing since before their grandfathers were born. They fall asleep thinking they're finally safe, not knowing that the forest itself is about to change the course of the war. The rescue they hoped for came in the form of Rohirrim revenge. But their real salvation lies deeper in Fangorn, where ancient powers are stirring to action. Merry and Pippin's journey is far from over, though they don't know it yet. Two hobbits just got picked up by something that shouldn't be able to move, and three hunters are about to walk into the strangest forest in Middle-earth, where the trees themselves might be watching. Dawn breaks over the battlefield, where Eomer's riders fought the Uruk-hai. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli finally catch up to find spears pointed at their faces. Dozens of Rohirrim have returned to check the area, and they don't take chances with strangers approaching their victory. The standoff looks dangerous until Eomer himself rides forward to see what's happening. The three hunters explain they're friends of Rohan and enemies of Saruman, which gets the spears lowered. More importantly, they're looking for two small prisoners who might have been with the orcs. Eomer's face grows serious when he hears about the hobbits. His men killed every orc in the battle and left none alive, which should be good news. But it also means he can't tell Aragorn what happened to any prisoners because nobody saw any during the fighting. The news hits Aragorn like a punch to the gut. They've been running for days, pushing themselves past exhaustion, only to arrive too late. The smoking pile of orc bodies tells the story of total victory, but it might also mean their friends are dead. Eomer sees the despair on Aragorn's face and recognizes something noble in the ranger's bearing. Despite being banished from Rohan, the captain decides to help these strangers who clearly care about their lost companions. Two horses get led forward as Eomer makes an offer that breaks his own exile conditions. Hasufel belonged to a rider who died in the battle, while Arod can carry Legolas with Gimli riding behind him. The gift violates Eomer's banishment, but some things matter more than following orders. The Horse Lord gives them a warning before he leaves. Fangorn Forest is dangerous and strange, full of things that don't belong in the normal world. Look for your friends, he tells them, but don't trust to hope because it has left these lands entirely. Eomer and his riders disappear toward the east, heading for whatever refuge they can find as exiles. The three hunters are alone again, with borrowed horses and the terrible possibility that they've failed their friends completely. Aragorn races to the orc pyre and starts searching through the ashes with desperate energy. No hobbit bones appear among the charred remains, which brings the first real relief they've felt since starting this chase. At least Merry and Pippin didn't burn with their captors. Gimli spots something glinting in the grass near the pyre. One of the hobbits' knives lies abandoned where they must have used it to cut their bonds after the battle ended. The blade proves they were alive when the fighting finished. Aragorn finds even better evidence as his ranger skills reveal the full story. Small footprints lead away from the battle site, along with pieces of cut rope that once bound the prisoners. The hobbits freed themselves and escaped during the chaos. The best discovery comes when Aragorn notices Pippin's leaf brooch in Eomer's possession. The captain had picked it up during his search of the battlefield, not knowing what it meant. The elven ornament confirms that both hobbits survived and made it away from their captors. The footprints lead straight into Fangorn Forest, which means following them into one of Middle-earth's most mysterious places. Few people enter these ancient woods, and fewer still come out unchanged by what they find inside. The atmosphere shifts the moment they pass under the trees. Sunlight struggles through heavy branches while the air feels thick with age and watching eyes. This isn't just a forest, but something alive and aware of intruders walking through its domain. Legolas feels the change most strongly because his elven senses pick up things that others miss. The trees themselves seem conscious and alert, as if the entire forest is one giant living being that knows about every footstep on its soil. Gimli mutters nervously about legends of tree spirits that most people dismiss as old stories. Being inside Fangorn makes those myths feel much more real and threatening. The dwarf grips his axe tighter while looking around for dangers he can't name. Aragorn tracks the hobbit prince deeper into the woods until something strange happens to the trail. The footprints suddenly veer off as if Merry and Pippin got lifted into the air by something much larger than themselves. New tracks appear alongside the hobbit prints. These belong to something enormous that walks on feet big enough to belong to a giant. The mystery of what happened to their friends gets more confusing with each step into the ancient forest. What Aragorn doesn't know is that Merry and Pippin encountered this mysterious creature just before dawn after escaping the battle. Grishnak had found them in the forest and was threatening to kill them when something incredible happened. A massive tree limb suddenly moved like a foot and stepped on Grishnak, crushing the orc flat in an instant. But this wasn't just any tree branch. The entire trunk lifted Merry and Pippin off the ground, holding one hobbit in each huge hand. The tree spoke to them in a voice like wind through leaves, calling them little orcs and scolding them for running around at night. The hobbits realized they were dealing with something far beyond their understanding of how the world works. This creature introduces himself as Treebeard, though his real name is Fangorn in the Old Tongue. Standing about 14 feet tall with bark for skin and leaves for hair, he looks like a tree that decided to start walking around and having conversations. Treebeard has never seen hobbits before and initially thinks they might be some new type of orc. The idea terrifies Merry and Pippin, who quickly explain they're from the Shire and have nothing to do with Saruman's forces. The ancient being considers this information with the careful slowness of something that measures time in centuries rather than minutes. He decides they're telling the truth about not being orcs, which makes him less angry but still cautious about what to do with them. Treebeard announces he must take them to the White Wizard for a final decision about their fate. The words alarm the hobbits because the only wizard they know in this area is Saruman, who definitely wants them dead. The Ent explains there's someone in Fangorn called Young Saruman or Curunir, but this person isn't the same as the evil wizard now controlling Isengard. The hobbits don't understand what he means, but they sense this might be good news. Carrying Merry and Pippin in his massive hands, Treebeard strides deeper into his forest home while giving a mournful call that echoes through the trees. The woods themselves seem to answer his voice as branches shift and leaves rustle in response. The ancient Ent takes his small passengers toward a gathering place where other tree shepherds might help decide what should be done with these strange little creatures who appeared in their forest. The hobbits hold on tight and hope they're heading toward help rather than more danger. Meanwhile, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli follow the mysterious tracks deeper into Fangorn, not knowing they're walking toward a meeting that will change everything they thought they knew about their lost wizard friend. Someone who should be dead is walking around in the woods, and when 3 hunters see him, they're going to get the shock of their lives. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli follow the mysterious tracks deeper into Fangorn Forest. They find drops of orc blood on the ground mixed with small hobbit footprints, telling the story of some kind of violent encounter. The evidence suggests their friends ran into trouble, but there's no way to know how it ended. That's when they spot a figure in white robes standing ahead of them through the trees. The sight makes their blood run cold because there's only one white wizard they know, and he's definitely their enemy. Gimli raises his axe while Legolas pulls back an arrow, ready to fight Saruman in his own forest. They've been chasing his orc army across Rohan, and now they think they have a chance to strike back at the wizard who caused all this trouble. But the stranger moves faster than either of them can react. Blinding light erupts from his staff, heating their weapons until they're too hot to hold. The axe and bow fall to the ground while the 3 companions shield their eyes from the brilliant flash. A calm voice speaks through the fading light. "You seek your friends," the figure tells them. "You're worried about them, but help isn't as far away as you think." The words sound nothing like what they'd expect from Saruman. That's when they realize this white-robed wizard isn't their enemy at all. The figure steps forward and reveals himself as Gandalf, somehow returned from the death they all witnessed in the mines of Moria. But this isn't the same gray-robed wizard who fell fighting the Balrog. This version wears shining white and seems to glow with inner light. The three friends can barely believe what they're seeing. They watched Gandalf plunge into the abyss while battling a creature of shadow and flame. No one could survive something like that, yet here he stands looking more powerful than ever before. Gandalf explains what happened after he fell with the Balrog into the depths under Moria. The fight didn't end with the fall, but continued through tunnels and passages deep in the earth. The two enemies battled their way up the endless stair to the peak of Celebdil Mountain. For 2 days and nights, wizard and demon fought on top of the world until Gandalf finally defeated his enemy. But victory came at the ultimate price. The effort of destroying the Balrog cost Gandalf his own life, leaving him dead on the mountaintop. He speaks about the experience like someone remembering a strange dream. Darkness took him, and he drifted out of thought and time itself. But something sent him back to finish the job he started, returning him to life with greater power than before. The resurrection transformed Gandalf the Grey into Gandalf the White, making him the new head of the Wizard Order. His face looks younger despite everything he's been through, though his eyes show the wisdom and sorrow of someone who's seen death and returned. At first, Gandalf seems confused about his own identity, even calling himself Saruman before correcting the mistake. He explains that he's become what Saruman should have been if the White Wizard hadn't fallen to corruption and evil. The new Gandalf has recovered most of his memories, though some details remain fuzzy from his ordeal. He greets Gimli by name after a moment of forgetfulness, which reassures the dwarf that this is really their old friend returned to them. Aragorn's first question shows what matters most to all of them. What happened to the hobbits? Are Merry and Pippin safe after everything that's occurred since the battle at Amon Hen? Gandalf smiles when he answers, telling them the hobbits met someone they didn't expect in the forest. He knows Treebeard has taken them in, though he doesn't explain exactly who or what Treebeard might be. The important thing is that Merry and Pippin are out of immediate danger. More than that, Gandalf hints that the hobbits' presence in Fangorn will help wake up powers that have been sleeping for too long. The Ents are about to get involved in the war against Saruman, though the three hunters don't understand what this means yet. Knowing their friends are safe allows Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli to focus on bigger problems. Gandalf explains that Merry and Pippin's fate is now tied to a larger plan that could change the outcome of the entire war. The wizard announces they must ride to Edoras immediately. King Theoden is under some kind of dark magic that keeps him weak and confused while his kingdom falls apart around him. Saruman's attacks are destroying Rohan, and only freeing the king can unite his people to fight back. Gimli wants to stay and look for the hobbits, but Gandalf insists there's no time for that. War is coming to Rohan, whether they're ready or not. The hobbits will have to take care of themselves while their friends help save an entire kingdom. They leave Fangorn and emerge into a sunny clearing where Gandalf gives a piercing whistle that echoes across the grasslands. The sound brings a magnificent horse galloping toward them at full speed, silver-white coat shining in the sunlight. This is Shadowfax, the greatest of the Miara's breed that only kings of Rohan are supposed to ride. But Shadowfax chose Gandalf as his rider, showing that the wizard's return has changed more than just his appearance and power. Gandalf mounts the legendary horse bareback while helping his companions onto Arad and Hasufel, the two horses Eomer lent them earlier. Without wasting any more time, they set out for Edoras at a pace that covers ground faster than any normal horses could manage. The ride takes them through the Westfold, where Saruman's destruction becomes impossible to ignore. Villages burn while desperate refugees flee along the roads with whatever belongings they can carry. The war has already begun, whether anyone wanted it or not. Gandalf's face grows darker with each sign of the devastation. They pause at one smoking village where his expression shows he understands exactly what Saruman's ambition has cost innocent people who just wanted to live their lives in peace. That night, while camping under the stars, Gandalf reveals information that changes everything Aragorn thought he knew about his role in the coming war. Sauron has figured out that Isildur's heir is alive and currently in Rohan, which means the Dark Lord will focus his attention here. This should be terrible news, but Gandalf seems almost happy about it. Sauron's focus on the wrong targets means he won't guess the real plan. While everyone fights over kingdoms and armies, two small hobbits are carrying the ring toward Mount Doom without anyone noticing. The enemy's eye looks in all the wrong places, searching for the ring among powerful people who might use it as a weapon. The idea that humble gardeners and bookish gentlemen could destroy what he spent centuries creating never occurs to the Dark Lord. Aragorn worries about Frodo carrying such a terrible burden alone, but Gandalf feels much better knowing Sam is with him. Trust a hobbit to stick by his friend, the wizard laughs, showing confidence that loyalty might be stronger than the ring's corruption. With that reassurance, they ride through the night toward Edoras, and whatever challenges wait in the royal court of Rohan. The war that started in the shadows is about to break into the open, and everything depends on whether they can wake up a king who's forgotten how to fight. A king who looks like he's 100 years old is about to get the biggest wake-up call in Middle-earth history. What happens next will either save Rohan or doom it completely. Gandalf and his companions reach Edoras on the 4th day since everything started falling apart at Amon Hen. The Golden Hall of Meduseld sits on top of the hill like a crown, but the city below feels heavy with sadness and fear. Inside the Great Hall, tragedy has just struck the royal family. Prince Theodred died from his wounds, leaving Éowyn weeping over her cousin's body. As she mourns, Grima Wormtongue creeps up behind her with fake comfort, putting his hand on her shoulder while whispering about spirits finding their way to the halls of their fathers. But Wormtongue has other things on his mind, besides comforting the grieving. He uses the moment to get closer to Éowyn, making her uncomfortable enough that she pulls away and flees outside to escape his unwanted attention. That's when she sees 4 strangers climbing the stone steps toward the hall. Éowyn stands at the doors looking out over the plains when something happens that feels like a bad omen. A sudden wind rips the royal banner from its pole, sending the white horse flag fluttering down to land at Aragorn's feet. The falling banner scares Éowyn enough that she hurries back inside, but the visitors see it as a sign of just how bad things have gotten in Rohan. When a kingdom's flag falls without warning, it usually means the kingdom itself is in serious trouble. At the hall's entrance, Captain Hama stops them with the standard security speech. The king isn't seeing visitors these days, and anyone who wants to enter has to give up their weapons first. That's Wormtongue's rule, and nobody gets to break it. Gandalf leans on his staff and insists it's just a walking stick that an old man needs to get around. Hama looks uncomfortable with the whole situation, but something about Gandalf makes him bend the rules. He lets the wizard keep his staff while the others hand over their swords and weapons. Inside Meduseld, the atmosphere feels as heavy as a tomb. King Theoden sits hunched on his throne, looking decades older than he should, with white hair hanging limp and eyes that seem to see nothing. Grima Wormtongue stands beside him like a snake, whispering poison into the king's ear. When Gandalf tries to greet Theoden, Wormtongue jumps in with insults. He calls Gandalf Stormcrow, a bringer of bad news and lies. The advisor clearly doesn't want anyone talking to the king without his permission, especially not someone as dangerous as a wizard. Gandalf doesn't waste time with words. Grima's men try to block him, but Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli handle that problem quickly. Aragorn even flips one guard over a table while the others deal with the rest using their fists instead of weapons. As Wormtongue realizes what's happening, Gandalf raises his staff and reveals his true power. The advisor shouts that wizards aren't allowed to carry staffs, but his protests come too late to stop what happens next. Theoden suddenly speaks, but the voice coming out of his mouth belongs to Saruman. The possessed king claims Gandalf the Grey has no power here, not realizing he's talking to Gandalf the White now. The wizard's response comes with blinding light that fills the entire hall. He tells Saruman he'll draw him out like poison from a wound, which starts an incredible battle of wills inside Theoden's mind. The king's body shakes as two powerful wizards fight for control of his soul. Saruman's hold breaks with a sound like thunder. Theoden slumps forward as the evil influence gets cast out of him, then slowly sits up as if a massive weight just lifted from his shoulders. The change is incredible to watch. Color returns to Theoden's face while his eyes clear and his back straightens. Years seem to fall away in seconds as the spell that made him look ancient gets broken. The people watching can barely believe they're seeing the same person. Theoden looks around confused, asking Gandalf why he's here. Then he notices Grima cowering nearby, and everything becomes clear. The king realizes how he's been tricked and manipulated, and his anger burns hot enough to melt steel. The restored king grabs Wormtongue by the neck and tosses him down the hall's stone steps like a sack of garbage. Guards who were loyal to Éomer get released from prison and want to finish the traitor off permanently. Theoden draws his sword and almost gives Grima exactly what he deserves, but Aragorn stops the killing blow. The ranger says enough blood has been spilled because of this man, and Gandalf nods his agreement. Sometimes mercy is stronger than revenge. Theoden orders his men to take the weasel away, and Grima scrambles out of the hall before anyone changes their mind. He steals a horse and rides off toward Isengard, probably to tell Saruman everything that just happened. With Wormtongue gone, people finally tell Theoden the terrible news about his son. Theodred is dead, and the king's mind is clear enough now to understand what that means. He breaks down weeping in Éowyn's arms for the first time since the spell took hold. They hold the funeral that same day on the hills outside Edoras. Theodred gets laid to rest in a grassy mound while Éowyn sings a sad song in the old language. Theoden places a single white flower on the grave, and his grief slowly turns into determination to protect what's left of his people. After the burial, the king calls a war council to figure out what to do next. Gandalf wants him to gather the Rohirrim and fight Saruman's army in the open, while Aragorn suggests recalling Éomer and his 2,000 riders from exile. But Theoden has different ideas. He's been isolated for so long that he doesn't trust anyone outside Rohan to help, and he's not sure his scattered forces can win a straight fight. Instead of riding to war, he decides to evacuate everyone to Helm's Deep, the ancient fortress that has never fallen to any enemy. Gandalf doesn't like this plan at all. He warns that Helm's Deep has one major weakness because there's no way out if things go wrong. The place could become a death trap if Saruman brings enough force to surround it completely. Seeing that Theoden won't change his mind, Gandalf makes his own decision. He tells Aragorn to look for his return at first light on the 5th day, then whistles for Shadowfax. The white horse appears like magic, and Gandalf rides off alone toward the north. Nobody knows where the wizard is going, but he's clearly got plans that don't involve hiding in a fortress. While Theoden prepares to run away from the fight, Gandalf is heading toward something that might change the entire war. The evacuation begins immediately as the entire population of Edoras gets ready to march to Helm's Deep. Women, children, elderly people, and the few remaining soldiers gather their belongings for the dangerous journey through the mountains. Éowyn gets put in charge of leading the civilians to safety, though she'd rather stay and fight. The responsibility weighs heavily on her shoulders because she knows these people's lives depend on reaching the fortress before Saruman's forces catch them. While everyone prepares to leave, Aragorn notices a wild horse in the royal stables. The animal is Brego, Theodred's beloved mount, who senses his master is gone forever. Aragorn approaches carefully and speaks in Elvish, which somehow calms the grieving horse. Éowyn watches in amazement as the ranger uses gentle words instead of force to soothe the distressed animal. When he explains that he learned Elvish growing up in Rivendell, she realizes there's much more to this mysterious man than meets the eye. Meanwhile, Grima Wormtongue arrives at Isengard, soaked and shaking from his desperate ride. Saruman greets his spy coldly and demands a full report on what happened in Edoras. The news gets worse with every word. Gandalf is alive and more powerful than before. Theoden is free and thinking clearly again. Worst of all, Isildur's heir is in Rohan, wearing the Ring of Barahir, which means Aragorn could unite all the kingdoms of men against Sauron. Saruman's face grows dark when he realizes how dangerous this situation has become. He knows he has to destroy Rohan's people before they can rally behind their restored king and his royal ally. The people of Rohan begin their long march to Helm's Deep in a column of wagons and walking refugees. Rain soaks everyone as they travel the mountain roads, hoping to reach safety before their enemies find them. From his tower, Saruman watches the evacuation through magical devices while Grima tells him exactly which route they're taking. The wizard smiles coldly and gives an order that will turn the journey into a nightmare. He sends out Warg riders, orcs, mounted on giant wolves, to hunt down the refugees and slaughter them on the road. The trap is set to wipe out Rohan's people before they can reach the safety of their ancient fortress. A column of refugees walking to safety is about to get hit by something they never saw coming. And one hero is going to pay the ultimate price to save people he's never met before. The people of Rohan trudge across the plains toward the White Mountains with their entire lives packed into wagons and bundles. This isn't the proud march of an army, but the desperate flight of civilians who know their enemies are coming. On the second day of traveling, they stop to rest and try to lift everyone's spirits. Gimli decides to entertain Éowyn with ridiculous stories about dwarf culture, explaining that dwarf women have beards just like the men. This makes outsiders think dwarves just pop out of holes in the ground fully grown. The absurd image actually makes Éowyn laugh, which is probably the first time she's smiled in months. Theoden rides nearby and tells Aragorn about his niece's tragic past. Her father died fighting orcs while her mother died of grief, leaving both Éowyn and Éomer orphans in the royal household. The king admits he should have been more like a father to them instead of just their uncle. Aragorn starts understanding why Éowyn carries so much sadness behind her brave face and why she's so determined to prove herself as a warrior. That evening around the campfire, Éowyn brings Aragorn a bowl of stew she made herself. He tries to be polite and takes a bite, only to discover it tastes terrible. The soup is over-salted and strange, but Aragorn forces himself to thank her anyway. When Éowyn turns away, Aragorn quickly dumps out the rest of the stew where she won't see it. He'd rather go hungry than hurt her feelings by refusing something she worked hard to prepare. Their conversation turns personal as Éowyn asks about Aragorn's past. She's heard rumors about his age and gets shocked when he admits he's 87 years old. Being one of the Dúnedain means he lives much longer than ordinary men, which makes Éowyn realize he's descended from the ancient kings of Númenor. When she asks about the pendant he wears around his neck, Aragorn hesitates to explain. The Evenstar belongs to Arwen, the elf woman he loves, but their relationship has become complicated in ways that are hard to talk about. That night, Aragorn dreams about his last conversation with Arwen in Rivendell. He remembers telling her about his fears that she'll suffer if he fails in his mission. But the dream also brings back painful memories of Elrond asking him to let Arwen go to the Undying Lands with the rest of her people. The conversation with Elrond happened at his mother's memorial, where the Elf Lord convinced Aragorn that staying in Middle-earth would only bring Arwen pain. Loving her meant letting her go, even if it broke his heart to do it. When Aragorn wakes up, he tells Éowyn that Arwen is sailing west with the other elves. She can see the sadness in his eyes and understands that love doesn't always work out the way people hope it will. The next day brings danger that nobody expected. As the refugee column moves through a valley, Legolas senses something wrong just before a massive warg charges over a hill and knocks down a Rohirrim scout. These aren't ordinary wolves, but giant creatures that serve as mounts for Saruman's orc riders. The ambush comes so fast that people barely have time to react before the entire valley becomes a battlefield. Theoden shouts orders to tighten the defensive formation while commanding Éowyn to keep the civilians moving toward Helm's Deep. She wants to stay and fight, but the king insists her job is protecting the people who can't protect themselves. Éowyn reluctantly leads the wagons away, while Theoden, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and the remaining warriors prepare to face a pack of snarling wargs with orc riders on their backs. Legolas reacts first by vaulting onto a horse and starting to pick off wargs with his bow. He even manages a trick shot where he swings up onto his mount while firing an arrow at the same time, which is the kind of thing that only elves can pull off. Theoden and Aragorn lead a cavalry charge with spears leveled, but the clash turns brutal immediately. Wargs are huge and muscular enough to smash into horses and tear them apart with claws and fangs. Riders from both sides get thrown around like toys. Gimli has the worst luck of anyone when he falls off his horse right into the middle of the fighting. A warg immediately jumps on him, but the dwarf manages to split its skull with his axe before it can bite him. Then another dead warg falls on top of him, pinning him to the ground. The dwarf spends most of the battle rolling around under warg corpses and chopping at anything that gets close enough. He still manages to rack up several kills, which he'll definitely want to compare with Legolas's score later. Aragorn fights his way through multiple enemies with his reforged sword until he comes face to face with Sharku, the ugliest orc leading this pack. The orc chief carries a spear and rides a warg that barrels straight at Aragorn like a battering ram. The fight becomes intense as Aragorn stabs Sharku's mount, causing the dying beast to buck and stumble toward the edge of a cliff. Sharku and Aragorn get tangled up with the warg as it plummets over the precipice into a rocky gorge far below. Legolas sees his friend disappear over the cliff and cries out in horror, but there's nothing anyone can do. The river runs fast and deep down there, and falling that far would kill almost anyone who tried it. With Aragorn gone, the remaining Rohirrim finish off the last of the wargs, though they pay a heavy price for victory. Many good riders lie dead on the field, including Captain Hama, who died in the first moments of the attack trying to protect his king. When the fighting ends, they find Sharku pinned under a dead warg, badly wounded but still alive. The orc captain mockingly tells them that the man who fell took a little tumble off the cliff, making it clear that Aragorn is dead. To make his point even crueler, Sharku shows them the Evenstar pendant that got caught on his gear during the fight. The sight of Arwen's necklace devastates Legolas and Gimli, who realize their friend really is gone. Legolas takes the pendant with shaking hands, while Gimli stands in stunned silence. They've lost one of their closest friends, and there's no time to even grieve properly because more enemies might be coming. King Theoden orders everyone to leave the dead where they fell and move toward Helm's Deep immediately. They can't afford to delay for funerals when Saruman's main army might appear at any moment. Legolas reluctantly follows the others, but keeps looking back at the cliff edge, hoping somehow that Aragorn might climb back up. But there's no sign of movement down in that rocky gorge where the river carries away anything that falls. What nobody knows is that Aragorn somehow survived the fall into the rushing water below. He got swept downstream, unconscious and badly wounded, losing his sword and bow in the process. The current carried him for miles before depositing him on a riverbank. Brego, the horse Aragorn had calmed back in Edoras, sensed his need and galloped away from the battlefield. The loyal animal found Aragorn's body washed up on the shore and stayed with him until he coughed back to life. In his half-conscious state, Aragorn had a vision of Arwen giving him breath and strength to survive. Whether that was real or just his imagination, something kept him alive when drowning should have killed him. With Brego's help, the wounded ranger climbs back onto horseback despite his injuries. He realizes the terrible danger Rohan faces because while hanging off that cliff, he glimpsed something that changes everything. Saruman's entire army is marching toward Helm's Deep, thousands of Uruk-hai with siege equipment and weapons designed to break the ancient fortress. Aragorn has to warn Theoden before it's too late, even if the ride might kill him. A woman who chose love over immortality is about to make the hardest decision of her life, and her choice will send help to the exact place where it's needed most. Aragorn rides toward Helm's Deep on Brego, pushing through his injuries because he's seen something that changes everything. From a high ridge, he spotted Saruman's entire army marching across the valley. 10,000 Uruk-hai or more, moving like a dark storm toward the fortress where Theoden's people are seeking safety. Lightning flashes behind the enemy column as they trample everything in their path. Aragorn stays hidden and spurs Brego harder, knowing he has to warn the fortress before this massive army arrives to destroy it. Meanwhile, far to the north in Rivendell, a father is about to break his daughter's heart for what he believes is her own good. Elrond senses that the war is turning darker, and he knows the elves need to leave Middle-earth before Sauron's power grows too strong to resist. The conversation between Elrond and Arwen happens in private, but the pain it causes will affect both of them forever. The Elf Lord explains that staying in Middle-earth for love will only bring his daughter suffering that could last for eternity. Elrond paints a picture that terrifies Arwen more than any army or Dark Lord could. Whether Aragorn lives or dies in the coming war, she will endure long after he's gone. If he fails and dies in battle, she'll fall into despair that could destroy her completely. But even if Aragorn succeeds and becomes king, the outcome isn't much better. He'll age and die as all mortals do, leaving Arwen alone to mourn him for thousands of years. The Elf Lord asks if his daughter really wants to spend eternity grieving for someone who lived and died in what feels like a brief moment to immortal beings. To drive home his point, Elrond shows Arwen a vision of her future. She sees herself dressed in mourning clothes, standing by Aragorn's tomb in a winter forest, completely heartbroken after watching the man she loved grow old and die. The image hits her like a physical blow. Elrond tells his daughter he doesn't want to leave her to such a terrible fate. The war might be won, but love between mortals and immortals always ends in tragedy. Better to leave now while she can still remember happiness instead of staying to watch it turn to sorrow. Arwen finds herself torn between her heart and her head. She chose a mortal life once before, but her father's words and that horrible vision shake her confidence. Part of her still believes Frodo's mission is the most important thing happening, because nothing else matters if the ring isn't destroyed. But if good defeats evil, would she really be happy knowing Aragorn will die someday while she lives on forever? The question haunts her as she realizes there might not be any good answers to this situation. Through tears, Arwen gives in to her father's advice. She agrees to sail to the Undying Lands with the other elves, giving up her future with Aragorn for both their sakes. The decision breaks her heart, but she believes it's the right thing to do. Her choice means breaking the promise she made when she gave Aragorn the Evenstar pendant. Though he still carries it after Legolas recovered it from the Warg battle, the commitment it represented is over. Arwen is effectively saying goodbye to her old life and the love that defined it. Under a gray, cloudy sky that matches everyone's mood, a host of elves begins leaving Rivendell for the journey to the Grey Havens. Arwen wears a blue cloak and walks among them with tears in her eyes, every step taking her further from the life she wanted. Elrond watches his daughter go with a heavy heart. He believes he's doing the right thing, but watching her suffer makes him question whether protecting someone sometimes means hurting them first. As Arwen's group departs, something mystical happens that connects to the concept of the grace of the Valar. Her life energy is tied to the power of the Evenstar, and as she leaves Middle-earth, that grace goes with her. The land itself loses something precious when she chooses exile over love. But Elrond doesn't spend all his time feeling sorry about personal problems. While his daughter travels toward the sea, he enters a trance-like conversation with Galadriel in Lothlorien. The powerful elf lady can speak across distances using her mind, and she has urgent news to share. Galadriel's telepathic voice carries warnings about how bad things are getting. The enemy's power grows stronger every day, while Saruman's armies gather for attacks that could destroy the free peoples of Middle-earth. Sauron's attention is turning toward Gondor, which means the Southern Kingdom will face terrible threats soon. She also knows that Frodo and Sam are getting closer to Mordor, but their situation is becoming more dangerous. The Ring-bearer's fate hangs in the balance, and there are people who might try to take the ring from him if they get the chance. Most importantly, Galadriel warns that Faramir, the young captain of Gondor, will be tempted to seize the ring for his people. If he succeeds in taking it from Frodo, the world will fall to darkness, because the ring will never reach Mount Doom. But Galadriel also brings hope along with her warnings. Men aren't completely helpless in this fight. There's real courage and strength in both Rohan and Gondor, but they'll fall without help because they're outnumbered and outgunned by their enemies. She asks Elrond a pointed question about the old alliance between elves and men. Where are the riders of Elendil and the blood of Númenor when Middle-earth needs them most? Are the elves really going to abandon the world to its fate just because their time is ending? The question hits home because Elrond realizes his daughter's departure represents the end of the Age of Elves. If they're truly leaving Middle-earth forever, shouldn't they help their allies one last time before going? Moved by Galadriel's words and his own sense of honor, Elrond makes a decision that will change the course of the war. He sends a company of elven warriors from Lothlorien to aid Rohan in their desperate hour. These are Galadrim elves led by Haldir, the same elf who guided the Fellowship through Lothlorien earlier in their journey. The decision is huge because in most versions of this story, no elves come to help at Helm's Deep. But in this telling, it represents one final act of friendship before the firstborn fade from Middle-earth. Elrond tells Galadriel that they will send help to the Rohirrim, honoring the ancient alliance between their peoples one last time. Her influence ensures that men won't have to fight alone against impossible odds. So while Theoden's people prepare for siege at Helm's Deep, an army of elven warriors marches to join them. The refugees and defenders don't know help is coming, but Elrond's decision might be the difference between victory and total destruction. The elves are about to fade from Middle-earth forever, but they'll go out fighting alongside the friends who stood with them through ages of war and peace. Some alliances are too important to abandon, even when your time in the world is ending. An ancient fortress that has never fallen is about to face its greatest test. But first, help arrives from the most unexpected place, and a presumed dead hero walks through the gates like a ghost. The refugees from Edoras finally reach the valley of Helm's Deep, just as the sun sets behind the mountains. Éowyn leads the long column of women, children, and elderly people into the massive stone fortress called the Hornburg. The place looks like it was carved out of the mountain itself. A huge wall called the Deeping Wall stretches across the entire valley, 20 feet high and strong enough to stop any army. Behind it sits the keep with its towers and throne room, built against the cliff face so enemies can only attack from one direction. Éowyn takes charge of getting everyone settled in the glittering caves, massive caverns that stretch deep into the mountain behind the fortress. These caves will serve as shelters where the civilians can hide while the battle rages outside. As she organizes food and medical supplies, Éowyn keeps watching for Aragorn among the arriving riders. But he doesn't appear with any of the groups, and her heart sinks a little more each time. King Theoden and the surviving warriors arrive shortly after the civilians, bringing terrible news about the Warg attack. When people learn that Aragorn apparently died saving them, a wave of grief spreads through everyone who knew him. Éowyn takes the news hardest of all. She turns away to hide her tears, but everyone can see how much the loss affects her. Legolas and Gimli look devastated too, though they try to focus on the approaching danger instead of their sorrow. Theoden walks the fortress walls to check the defenses and plan for the coming siege. The deeping wall looks strong, but he notices a small drain called a culvert where the stream flows out under the wall. It seems like a minor weakness, but every fortress has its flaws. The king takes comfort in knowing that no enemy has ever broken Helm's Deep by force. In all of Rohan's history, this fortress has stood against every attack. If there's anywhere his people can survive Saruman's assault, this is it. Meanwhile, back at Isengard, Grima Wormtongue arrives wet and shaking from his desperate ride. Saruman greets his spy with cold displeasure and demands a full report on what happened at Edoras. When Grima mentions the culvert under Helm's Deep's wall, Saruman's eyes light up with a terrible idea. The wizard has been experimenting with explosive blasting fire, a black powder that can blow holes in solid stone. In a tense scene, Saruman carefully loads clay pots with the dangerous powder while warning Grima not to get too close with any open flames. The stuff is so volatile that one spark could blow up half the tower. Learning that Rohan's people have trapped themselves in a canyon with only one exit makes Saruman laugh with genuine pleasure. He tells Grima that Helm's Deep will fall, then sends his massive Uruk-hai army marching with orders to kill everyone they find. Back at the fortress, Gimli tries to lift everyone's spirits by entertaining the defenders on the walls. Young boys and old men put on armor that doesn't fit while listening to the dwarf boast about killing 41 orcs at Amon Hen. The dwarf also tells stories about the glittering caves behind them, describing beautiful crystal formations that sparkle like stars. His enthusiasm makes a few people smile despite their fear, which is exactly what everyone needs right now. Inside the keep, Theoden puts on his royal armor with help from his loyal servant Gamling. As the old soldier buckles the king's breastplate, Theoden wonders aloud how his reign came to this point. Fighting for survival with an army of children and grandfathers wasn't how he imagined ending his rule. Gamling reassures his king that they'll fight to the last man if necessary. Theoden nods grimly and heads back to the walls, determined to protect his people no matter what it costs. That's when something incredible happens. A horn call echoes across the valley, but this isn't the harsh sound that orcs make. This horn plays clear and beautiful, like music made of light itself. To everyone's amazement, a host of elves from Lothlorien marches into Helm's Deep, led by Haldir, the same elf who guided the Fellowship through the Golden Wood. They wear shining mail and carry longbows that look deadly accurate. Haldir approaches King Theoden and delivers a message that changes everything. He brings word from Elrond of Rivendell about an ancient alliance between elves and men. The elves have come to honor that old friendship in Rohan's darkest hour. Theoden can barely believe what he's hearing. He welcomes the elves with genuine gratitude, knowing their arrival might be the difference between victory and total destruction. The weary defenders gain new hope when they see reinforcements arriving. Legolas feels overjoyed to see his own people again, while Gimli just appreciates having more skilled warriors on their side. The arrival of the elves doesn't replace Aragorn, but it definitely makes everyone feel less hopeless. That's when the second miracle happens. A guard on the wall shouts that someone is approaching the gates on horseback. At first, nobody can make out who it is through the rain and darkness. But then they realize it's Aragorn, looking battered but very much alive. The gates open to let him in, and Legolas practically tackles his friend with relief and joy. The elf grabs Aragorn in a tight embrace, while Gimli thumps him on the shoulder hard enough to knock over a smaller person. Aragorn brings urgent news that confirms everyone's worst fears. He saw Saruman's army on the march, at least 10,000 Uruk-hai heading straight for Helm's Deep. The force is larger than anything Rohan has ever faced before. Theoden tries to sound confident, but Aragorn warns that this isn't a normal siege. Saruman wants to wipe out every person in Rohan, not just win a battle. Legolas has a brief argument with Aragorn in Elvish, worrying that 300 defenders can't possibly beat 10,000 attackers. Aragorn snaps back that they'll fight anyway, even if it means dying alongside the people they're trying to protect. Inside the keep, Éowyn can hardly believe Aragorn is alive when she thought she'd lost him forever. She begs to fight alongside the men instead of hiding in the caves. But Aragorn explains that protecting the civilians is just as important and honorable as fighting on the walls. Éowyn reluctantly agrees to lead the women and children into the glittering caves, though she arms herself with a sword just in case the defenses fail. Her last look at Aragorn carries all the fear that this might be their final goodbye. With only hours left before the enemy arrives, everyone takes their positions. Aragorn, Legolas, and Haldir arrange the elven archers along the deeping wall, while Rohirrim bowmen and even young boys with oversized weapons join them. King Theoden walks the battlements, giving encouragement to defenders who look terrified but determined. Aragorn kneels beside a young boy named Haleth, son of the fallen Captain Hama, and tells him that even the smallest person can change the course of history. Storm clouds gather overhead as night falls completely. Rain begins lashing the fortress, while men and elves stand silently on the walls, staring into the darkness beyond. Then they see the first torches flickering in the distance. War drums pound like giant heartbeats, while thousands of orc voices hum in the darkness. Lightning flashes reveal the truth that everyone feared. An ocean of Uruk-hai surrounds Helm's Deep, more enemies than most of these defenders have ever seen in one place. The Battle of Helm's Deep is about to begin. One nervous old man is about to start the biggest battle in Middle-earth by accident, and what happens next will either save Rohan or destroy it completely. Rain pours down on both armies as 10,000 Uruk-hai form up in front of Helm's Deep. These aren't the ragged orcs that most people have dealt with before. These warriors carry tall spears, swords, and crossbows while wearing black shields marked with Saruman's white hand. The deeping wall stands between this massive army and the keep, defended by just a few hundred Rohirrim and elves. Old men and young boys stand next to immortal elven warriors, all of them knowing they're probably going to die tonight. King Theoden and Aragorn walk along the wall trying to encourage everyone, but the odds speak louder than any words of comfort. Below, at the gate, a handful of horsemen wait in case they need to charge out, though there aren't nearly enough of them to make a difference. A terrible quiet falls over the valley, broken only by thunder and the war drums that the Uruks pound in rhythm. The enemy soldiers start chanting while beating their weapons against the ground, trying to scare the defenders into running away. The psychological warfare might have worked on a normal army, but these men and elves hold their positions despite their fear. They've come too far and lost too much to give up now, even when facing impossible odds. That's when disaster strikes in the most unexpected way. An elderly Rohirrim archer on the wall gets so nervous that his hands start shaking uncontrollably. Before anyone can stop him, his trembling fingers accidentally release an arrow. The shot whistles through the rain and strikes a snarling Uruk in the front rank, killing him instantly. There's a moment of shocked silence as everyone realizes what just happened. The battle has started by accident, and there's no way to take it back. The Uruk-hai roar with anger and charge toward the wall like a black wave crashing against stone. The defenders have seconds to prepare before 10,000 enemies hit their fortifications with everything they've got. Aragorn shouts the command, and volleys of arrows streak from the wall into the rushing orcs. Many Uruks fall, but there are so many that the ones behind just trample over the bodies and keep coming. Nothing is going to stop this assault. The attackers bring dozens of siege ladders that they hook onto the battlements. Within minutes, Uruk-hai soldiers start climbing toward the top of the wall with fierce determination, ready to hack apart anyone who tries to stop them. The first enemies to reach the top get met by elven blades and Rohirrim spears. A brutal fight breaks out across the entire length of the wall as defenders try to push the ladders back, while more and more enemies climb up. Haldir's elves fight with the skill that comes from centuries of training, cutting down Uruks left and right. Meanwhile, Legolas and Gimli turn the battle into a competition, counting their kills to keep each other motivated. Legolas shouts that he's got 17 kills while skewering another orc. Gimli grumbles back that he's only got 2 because he's too short to reach the action on top of the wall. The dwarf even asks Aragorn to toss him across a gap later in the battle so he can get to more enemies. While the main fight rages on the wall, something much more dangerous is happening below. Saruman sent a special team of Uruk engineers to target the weak spot that Wormtongue told him about. They rush toward the culvert where the stream flows out under the wall. These engineers carry crude explosives made from Saruman's blasting fire, a substance like gunpowder that Middle-earth has never seen before. They cram the powder kegs into the drain opening while their allies provide cover from the defenders above. Aragorn and the others on the wall spot what's happening and realize too late what it means. They try to stop the attack, but the engineers are protected by shields that arrows can't penetrate. With the explosives in place, a wild-eyed Uruk berserker covered in white paint takes a running start toward the culvert. Legolas shoots him twice with arrows, but nothing can stop the fanatic from completing his mission. The berserker leaps into the drain with his torch, triggering a massive explosion that rocks the entire fortress. The ground shakes while flames and rocks erupt from the blast site. A huge section of wall gets blown apart, creating a gaping hole that the army can pour through. The shockwave throws Aragorn, Gimli, and other defenders to the ground. Many elves and men get killed or stunned by flying debris. Rainwater mixed with blood runs through the gap while dozens of Uruk-hai immediately swarm through the breach. Aragorn picks himself up and realizes the outer wall is lost. He yells for everyone to withdraw to the keep, the last line of defense between the enemy and the civilians hiding in the caves behind the fortress. The defenders start pulling back from the wall and the main gate, which is also under heavy attack from a battering ram. During the retreat, Haldir fights to cover the withdrawal, but gets struck down by an Uruk sword. Aragorn catches the dying elf captain as he collapses, but there's no time to help him with more enemies charging forward. He and Gimli have to jump down from the wall to avoid getting cut off from the retreat. Before falling back completely, Theoden and Aragorn lead one last sortie to buy time at the main gate. They burst through a side door and surprise the orcs who are trying to break down the entrance. This is when Gimli makes his famous request for Aragorn to toss him across a gap because he's too short to jump it himself. It's a moment of humor in the middle of chaos, as Aragorn heaves the dwarf over the gap and Gimli lands swinging his axe. Together they scatter the orcs at the gate long enough for the defenders inside to push away the broken battering ram and bar the doors again. Legolas helps pull them back up through a side entrance with a rope. The small victory buys a little time, but soon the gate gets smashed open anyway, and Uruks begin pouring into the courtyard. The defenders fall back to their final position inside the Hornburg Keep. They barricade the great doors of the throne room, while the women and children remain hidden in the caves behind them. Theoden, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Gamling, and a handful of exhausted men prepare for their last stand. The Uruk-hai start breaking down the keep's heavy doors with axes and grappling hooks. The sound of splintering wood echoes through the hall as the defenders realize their situation has become hopeless. Theoden looks around at his remaining men and feels despair settling over him. By dawn, his people will probably be slaughtered, and Rohan will cease to exist. He asks what men can do against such reckless hate, nearly ready to give up entirely. But Aragorn refuses to accept defeat. He remembers Gandalf's promise to return at first light on the 5th day, and that time is almost here. Even if help doesn't come, he wants to die fighting rather than cowering behind barricades. He suggests to Theoden that they ride out together one last time, charging the enemy with swords in hand. If they're going to die anyway, let it be as warriors, not as victims waiting for the end. The idea stirs something in Theoden's heart. He agrees to the desperate plan as Gimli sounds the horn of Helm Hammerhand from the tower. The ancient horn echoes across the valley like a final call to battle. As the doors of the keep start splintering apart, Theoden and Aragorn mount horses inside the throne room, along with about 20 remaining riders. The king shouts for the people of Eorl to ride forth one more time. They burst out of the keep and surprise the Uruk-hai on the steps just as dawn breaks over the hilltop. The sudden burst of sunlight blinds many of the orcs, and the small cavalry charge cuts through their ranks like a sword through silk. For a moment it looks like courage and determination might triumph over impossible odds. But everyone knows this charge can't last long against 10,000 enemies, no matter how brave the riders are. Two small hobbits are about to trick the oldest living things in Middle-earth into starting a war. And what they find when they get there is going to make those ancient tree shepherds absolutely furious. While the battle rages at Helm's Deep, something much quieter but equally important is happening deep in Fangorn Forest. Treebeard has called a meeting of all the Ents he can find, maybe a couple dozen ancient tree shepherds gathering at a glade called Durndingle. Merry and Pippin watch in fascination as these towering creatures hold their council, speaking in rumbling voices that sound like wind through leaves. The Entish language moves slowly because when you've lived for thousands of years, there's no reason to rush through conversations. Hours pass as the Ents deliberate about whether to get involved in the war that's tearing Middle-earth apart. Merry fidgets with impatience while Pippin tries to follow what's being discussed, though they can only understand fragments of the ancient speech. By nightfall, Treebeard announces the decision that crushes both hobbits' hopes. The Ents have decided not to go to war. They can't hold back this storm of violence, and besides, this isn't really their fight. The tree shepherds will stay in their forest and let the younger races settle their own problems. Merry explodes with outrage at the decision, arguing passionately that Saruman's war will eventually destroy everything, including the forests the Ents are trying to protect. Pippin tries to comfort his friend while Treebeard gently prepares to carry them to safety. The Ent leader plans to take them to the edge of the forest nearest their home, essentially dropping them off near a road back to the Shire. Since the Ents won't fight, the least they can do is get the hobbits away from the danger zones. Merry makes one last desperate plea, painting a picture that should terrify any creature that loves growing things. Saruman will burn down all of Fangorn once he's done with Rohan, he argues. The fires of Isengard will spread until everything green and good is gone forever. But Treebeard, burdened by the weight of ages and careful deliberation, feels the Ents can't act hastily. They've survived this long by being cautious about getting involved in the affairs of shorter-lived folk. As Treebeard carries them toward what he thinks is their home direction, Pippin suddenly gets a brilliant idea. He realizes they need to show Treebeard something that will change his mind about staying neutral in this war. The Hobbit asks Treebeard to take them south instead, toward Isengard's borders. He pretends they need to go that direction to get home, even playfully suggesting that since they came from the south with the orcs, maybe that's the way they should leave. Treebeard doesn't understand the geography of Hobbit homes very well, so he agrees to the change in direction. He strides southward through his forest domain, carrying Merry and Pippin toward something that will change everything. When they emerge from the tree line overlooking Isengard, Treebeard stops dead in his tracks. What he sees below makes him go completely silent with shock and growing rage. The sight is worse than any battlefield because it represents something evil beyond mere killing. The area around Isengard used to be green forest called the Treegarth of Orthanc. Ancient trees grew there for centuries, creating a woodland paradise that connected to Fangorn itself. Now it's nothing but stumps and scorched earth stretching as far as anyone can see. Saruman's orcs cut down thousands of trees to feed the hungry furnaces of Isengard. Every stump represents a life that took decades or centuries to grow, destroyed in minutes to power the wizard's war machine. The devastation spreads across the landscape like a wound that will never heal. Treebeard stands on the hill looking out over the graveyard of his forest friends, and something breaks inside him. The ancient being lets out a sound that starts as a mournful wail and becomes a roar of pure wrath that echoes for miles across the valley. Many of these trees were his friends, he tells the hobbits, his voice shaking with fury. The senseless destruction tips the balance in his ancient heart. His eyes blaze with anger as he bellows that a wizard should know better than to destroy what took so long to create. That roar becomes a call to war that other Ents hear from deep within Fangorn. One by one, they begin appearing from the forest behind Treebeard. Oaks, beeches, and other tree-like giants stride out of the shadows, gathering around their leader and the two small hobbits. The Ents have finally awakened to the reality that Saruman won't stop with Rohan. Their forest will be next unless they act now. Treebeard announces that the Ents are going to war in what will become known as the Last March of the Ents. Merry and Pippin watch in amazement as these towering beings, some 14 feet tall and gnarled like living trees, come together with shared purpose and rage. The gentle tree shepherds have become an army of nature's vengeance. The march down to Isengard begins with Ents blowing deep horn calls that sound like the fury of the natural world itself. Saruman's orcs, who were preparing to march out and join the attack on Helm's Deep, find themselves facing an enemy they never imagined. The Ents break through Isengard's outer defenses like living battering rams. Their strength is incredible as they uproot boulders and hurl them like pebbles, stomp orcs flat, and smash buildings with their branch-like arms. Orc arrows and swords can barely scratch their bark-like skin. Only fire poses any real threat to them, but there are too many Ents moving too fast for the orcs to organize an effective defense with torches. The orcs who stayed behind at Isengard, instead of marching to Helm's Deep, stand no chance against this assault. Some flee in panic, while others get crushed under massive wooden feet. The Ents tear apart war machines and furnaces with their bare hands. One Ent named Beachbone catches fire from a spilled pot of molten metal and runs toward the water to put himself out. The sight of their friend burning drives the other Ents to even greater fury as they systematically destroy everything Saruman built. Treebeard directs the attack while keeping an eye on Saruman, who has retreated to his tower of Orthanc like a rat hiding in a hole. The Ent leader calls for the ultimate act of destruction against the wizard's stronghold. The Ents break open the dam that Saruman built to control the river Isen for his mills. When the sluice gates burst, the unleashed river roars into Isengard like a tsunami, flooding through the industrial pits and tunnels. Water crashes into hot furnaces, creating geysers of steam while drowning the fires that powered Saruman's war effort. Within minutes, the entire fortress becomes a lake with only the Tower of Orthanc sticking up like a black finger. The flood saves Beachbone by extinguishing the flames that were consuming him. More importantly, it destroys Saruman's power completely. The wizard who thought he could conquer Middle-earth is now trapped in his tower, surrounded by water and very angry Ents. Merry and Pippin watch the destruction with satisfaction, knowing their trick worked perfectly. They find a storehouse that survived the flooding and discover food and pipeweed from the Shire, including Longbottom Leaf that makes them feel like they're almost home. The Ents position themselves around Orthanc to make sure Saruman can't escape. Treebeard and his folk have taken their revenge on behalf of all the trees that died to fuel the wizard's ambitions. The forests have answered the call to war, and one of the two towers has fallen to nature's wrath. With Isengard in ruins and Saruman powerless, the balance of the war has shifted in ways that no one could have predicted. Two small hobbits and some very old trees have just changed the fate of Middle-earth. A man who wants to save his kingdom is about to make the worst mistake of his life, and it's going to take a speech from a gardener to change his mind. After capturing Frodo, Sam, and Gollum in the forests of Ithilien, Faramir makes a decision that could doom Middle-earth. He's taking them to Osgiliath, the ruined city that spans the Anduin River. His plan is simple but terrible. Bring the ring to his father Denethor in Minas Tirith as a mighty gift that could help Gondor win the war. Frodo begs Faramir to reconsider, knowing this goes against everything the quest is supposed to accomplish. The ring can't be used as a weapon because it will corrupt anyone who tries. But Faramir believes he can succeed where others failed. Osgiliath was once the capital of Gondor, filled with beautiful buildings and bridges that connected both sides of the great river. Now it's a battlefield where Faramir's rangers fight to hold the western bank against Sauron's forces attacking from the east. When they arrive, the city is under heavy assault. Mordor orcs pour across the river, while Faramir's men fight desperately among crumbling streets and broken statues. Arrows whistle through the air, while buildings collapse from catapult stones. Frodo and Sam find themselves in an active war zone for the first time. They duck behind rubble as projectiles fly overhead, completely out of their element in this kind of massive battle. The peaceful Shire never prepared them for anything like this chaos. The ring starts affecting Frodo more strongly as they get closer to Mordor. He feels the eye of Sauron searching for him while the weight around his neck grows heavier with each step. The proximity to enemy forces makes the ring's power harder to resist. Standing on a ledge overlooking the river, Frodo becomes increasingly disoriented. He sees the eye's distant glow in his mind and hears the terrible screech of the Nazgul somewhere nearby. The ring is calling to its master, and Frodo is losing the battle to keep it hidden. That's when one of the ring wraiths on a fell beast swoops over the city, drawn by the ring's presence. The winged creature and its dark rider circle overhead like vultures, searching for the source of the power they can sense. Frodo, completely entranced by the ring's influence, climbs up a ruined stairway to an exposed platform. He holds out the ring as if offering it to the Nazgul's searching gaze, his mind no longer his own. The ring wraith senses its prize and dives toward him with claws extended. Sam tackles Frodo just in time, knocking them both off the ledge into a lower courtyard as the fell beast's claws scrape the stone where they were standing. Without Sam's quick thinking, the ring would already be in enemy hands. Faramir's archers fire arrows at the winged monster, and one shot hits the fell beast, causing it to shriek and pull away. Faramir himself shoots an arrow from a captured Morgul bow that helps drive the Nazgul back across the river. The attack creates chaos in the city as several Gondorian soldiers panic, and orcs use the distraction to press their assault. In the confusion, Sam and Frodo tumble down broken stairs into a courtyard where they're temporarily safe from the fighting. But Frodo isn't safe from the ring's influence. In his confused state, he actually draws Sting and points it at Sam, almost stabbing his dearest friend. The ring has twisted his mind so badly that he can't tell friend from enemy. Sam gently talks him down, reminding Frodo who he is and bringing him back to his senses. Frodo drops the sword and breaks down completely, telling Sam he can't continue the mission. He feels hopeless and defeated. That's when Sam delivers the speech that changes everything. As the battle quiets around them, the loyal gardener talks about the stories that really matter. Tales full of darkness and danger, where people don't want to know how they end because the situation looks hopeless. But the folk in those stories keep going anyway, Sam explains, because they're holding on to something important. There's good in this world, and it's worth fighting for no matter how bad things get. Sam's words deeply move Faramir, who overhears the entire speech. He finally understands the pure loyalty these hobbits share and the incredible burden they're carrying. He realizes why his brother Boromir fell to temptation and how dangerous the ring truly is. Witnessing their nobility and hearing Sam's wisdom, Faramir has a complete change of heart. He tells Frodo and Sam that he thinks they understand each other at last. Instead of taking the ring to his father, he's going to let them continue their mission. The decision could cost Faramir his life when Denethor learns what happened. Letting the ring go will be seen as treason by his father. But Faramir chooses to do what's right instead of what's expected. As dawn breaks after the long night of battles, Faramir leads them to a sewer tunnel that exits on the far side of Osgiliath. He returns Frodo's belongings and gives them provisions for the journey ahead. He brings Gollum forward and sternly warns the creature that any betrayal will be answered for even if Faramir isn't there to see it. Gollum nods obediently, though he secretly resents Faramir for the earlier violence against him. Frodo explains their plan to enter Mordor through a secret route near Minas Morgul, the dead city that was once called Minas Ithil. When he mentions Cirith Ungol, Faramir's face darkens with concern. He's heard whispers of horrible things in that mountain pass. Faramir urges them not to take that path, but Frodo explains they have no choice. The Black Gate is too heavily guarded for them to enter Mordor the obvious way. The secret route may be dangerous, but it's their only option. With a final salute to Sam and a blessing for Frodo, Faramir lets them go. He warns Gollum one last time that death will find him quickly if he brings harm to Frodo, then watches as the three companions vanish into the wilderness. Frodo and Sam put on their elven cloaks and continue east with Gollum leading the way toward the Mountains of Shadow. They leave Osgiliath just as the sun rises, while behind them Faramir's men continue defending the ruined city. Their path now leads toward Cirith Ungol and the final leg of their journey to Mount Doom. They don't know what horrors wait in that mountain pass, but they have no choice except to trust their treacherous guide and hope his oath will keep him loyal. Victory at Helm's Deep changes everything, but while some celebrate, others are walking into the darkest place in Middle-earth, and what happens next will determine the fate of the world. Just as hope seems lost at Helm's Deep, help arrives from the most unlikely source. Gandalf returns with Éomer and his riders, attacking the Uruk-hai from behind, while Theoden and Aragorn charge from the front. Caught between two forces, Saruman's army gets completely crushed. The surviving orcs flee in panic, but they run straight into something even worse than the battle they're escaping. A mysterious forest of Huorns has appeared overnight at the valley's mouth, sent by Treebeard to make sure none of Saruman's forces survive. These living trees exact their own revenge on the fleeing orcs. As the sun rises, it reveals that no orc who entered that dark wood ever came out alive. The Huorns disappear as quietly as they arrived, leaving only piles of orc remains behind. On the walls of Helm's Deep, exhausted defenders cheer at the sight of victory. Éowyn emerges from the caves with the refugees, overwhelmed with relief to see Aragorn alive and successful. She embraces King Theoden joyfully, while everyone celebrates their impossible survival. The cost was heavy, though. Many good men and brave elves died defending the fortress, including Haldir, who gave his life to save others. But against all odds, they held out long enough for help to arrive. Legolas and Gimli finally settle their kill count competition, with both claiming 43 enemies defeated. Gimli sits on top of a dead Uruk while boasting about his total. Legolas shoots an already dead orc that was still twitching and claims it for his final count. Gimli points out that his axe was already buried in the orc's skull, but Legolas grins and says it was still moving. The friendly argument ends in a draw, but more importantly, it shows how the elf and dwarf have become true friends. Gandalf gathers everyone on the hill overlooking Helm's Deep and delivers a sobering reminder. The battle here is over, but the real war is just beginning. Sauron will turn his full attention to Gondor next, and all their hopes rest on Frodo completing his mission. The wizard urges Theoden to ride to Isengard and confront Saruman, then prepare Rohan for the greater battles ahead. Victory feels good, But it's only the first step in a much longer struggle. When they reach Isengard, they find it completely flooded and destroyed. Treebeard stands guard while Saruman remains trapped in his tower like a rat in a cage. The mighty fortress that once threatened all of Middle-earth is now nothing but ruins and water. Merry and Pippin greet their astonished friends with casual smiles, asking if anyone wants food or pipeweed after their long battle. The hobbits have been living well among the wreckage, finding stores of salted pork, apples, and even Longbottom leaf from the Shire. Gimli can't believe the two smallest members of their group managed to destroy Saruman's entire operation without any help. The reunion brings joy after so much separation and struggle. Meanwhile, in Gondor, Faramir returns to Minas Tirith knowing he'll have to face his father's anger about releasing the ring. The decision to let Frodo go could cost him his life, but he knows he did the right thing even if Denethor disagrees. In the wasteland north of Mordor, Frodo and Sam continue their journey with Gollum, leading them toward the Mountains of Shadow. They wear orc cloaks as disguises while trudging through ash-covered plains under dark skies. Sam tries to keep their spirits up by wondering if people will someday tell stories about their adventure. He calls Frodo brave, but Frodo responds by saying the tale should be called Samwise the Brave, since he wouldn't have gotten far without his loyal friend. The conversation shows their deep bond, but darker things are happening behind them. Gollum talks to himself about feeling betrayed by his master because of the incident with Faramir. The Smeagol side of his personality feels hurt and abandoned. The evil Gollum side uses this pain to convince Smeagol they should get revenge on Frodo. He suggests letting her deal with the hobbits, referring to something terrible that waits in the tunnels of Cirith Ungol. Smeagol reluctantly agrees, thinking they can take the ring after she kills the hobbits. The trio climbs into the Ephel Duath Mountains on Mordor's border while black clouds gather overhead. Sauron is preparing for war, and the darkness spreads like a blanket over the land. As they reach a ridge, Frodo and Sam see the distant red glow that marks Mount Doom. Despite exhaustion and growing danger, Frodo steels himself for what lies ahead. Sam stays faithful at his side, while Gollum guides them forward with treachery hidden behind his meek appearance. The Two Towers ends with victory and hope, balanced against growing darkness. Helm's Deep and Isengard have fallen to the forces of good, but Frodo and Sam are walking into their greatest danger yet. The Fellowship is scattered across Middle-earth, but each member is playing their part in the larger war. As Gandalf warned, the real battle for Middle-earth is just beginning. Two small hobbits continue their trek across the wasteland, tiny figures against the dark landscape, carrying the fate of the world toward the fires of Mount Doom. Their journey will lead them through terrors that make everything they've faced so far look easy. Shelob's Tunnel, the path to Mount Doom, and the final confrontation with the ring's power all wait ahead.